Alright, so this is gonna be What If Deku Had the Blacklight Virus Remastered. So, if you've been with my channel for a long time, you know that my Blacklight series has been my first and almost most long running series. So the reason why I'm doing this is because, like I said before, it's my first series, so my first couple videos on it aren't as high quality as some of my other videos in terms of both audio and the fluidity of the video and things like that. So that's really what I'm trying to do, is kind of remaster some of my old kind of what ifs so that they are more watchable. People can get into the series better through these kind of videos. So yeah, this is actually gonna go over part 1 and part 2 so that I could condense it as well as make it easier for people to listen to. So I don't know how many series or how many parts I'm gonna do for this remaster. Maybe probably like 3 at the most. So yeah, so our story would begin right after All Might gives Deku the hair for him to basically get one for all. So up to this point, everything has been pretty much normal. Deku in this one is going to have a dormant quirk, that being living virus. This gives him the ability to have super regeneration and actually change his DNA through basically evolution and consuming foreign biomass. So when I say biomass, I'm talking about anything organic. So that's what I mean. So what this virus does is able to change different parts of your body as well as your structure and everything like that, to the point where you're superhuman in almost every way. I'm not going to go into every power since I don't want to make this video too long, so let's get back into the story. So All Might gives him the piece of hair. Deku takes it reluctantly, just how he does in the anime, and goes home. So I believe he actually gets the hair on the same day that he has to go to the entry exam. So what Deku does is that he goes back home to get changed and to eat breakfast. At this point, Deku's body is going through some changes, that being his quirk actually activating. So it makes him feel hungry, and he goes to eat breakfast, which he does, and this doesn't satisfy Deku really too much. He's still pretty hungry, and he doesn't really know why, because he ate this normal amount of breakfast almost every day. I guess he chalks it up to him basically exercising and his body needing more kind of nutrients, you could say. So Deku gets ready and goes to UA so he could take the entry exam. First he takes the written part so that he could do everything necessary. So he does the written part of the exam, and he would do the same as he does in the anime. After this, he goes to the basically the practical part, and this is with the robots in that kind of city area. So Deku does not trip in this instance when he gets to UA, because he's feeling a bit more confident with All Might, and his virus is actually giving him this is the point where the virus is actually changing his body a little bit more. It's releasing basically chemicals into his body that basically deal with stress and keeps him kind of cool-headed and makes him able to deal with stress easier as well as be more calm. So this is one thing that the virus does help Deku with, even though Deku doesn't really know at this point. These are kind of the passive kind of things. So Deku will not meet with Rocket just yet. He does see her during the point where they're waiting for the gates to open, but he doesn't really want to go talk to her. He has no reason to. So he's just looking around at each of the students that are there, and he's wondering, what is their quirk? And he doesn't know just yet that he has the Blacklight virus. He still thinks his only quirk is one for all. So when the doors or the gates open, he goes and runs, and it goes pretty much the same as in canon, where he's trying to find a robot to basically destroy, but he really can't. This is until Uraraka is actually under some rubble and starts screaming for help, and this is where everyone starts to run away, not really wanting to get involved and not really being able to fight the Zero Pointer. Obviously Deku wants to help everyone because he has a true heart of a hero, and thus goes for Uraraka even though he knows that it's very dangerous. So what he does is what he does in the anime, and that is jumping into the air and going for a punch. So it's a little bit different than what it is in the anime. First off, he does jump with one for all, being able to use 100%. Well, he doesn't know how to control one for all just yet, so he has to use 100% into his legs. This causes his legs to basically break because of the strength required to use one for all. Then he goes for a punch. Something strange happens though. Instead of going for a normal punch, his hand, all of it gets covered by a weird black substance. This is the biomass that I was talking about before. So it covers his hands and basically entire arms. So what Deku just unlocked is the muscle mass ability. This greatly increases strength and throwing distance. So when Deku goes for the hit, instead of the Zero Pointer only getting barely knocked over, or not really knocked over, but his head basically caved in, just in the anime, it's actually completely destroyed. This muscle mass ability is very, very strong. It increases your strength by a lot. I believe it was tenfold, which is around 10 times, or it was double. I'm not sure exactly, but yeah, it does increase your strength by a lot. And when Deku hits, he's falling because obviously he jumped very high and he doesn't know how to use one for all yet. And this is when he's about to land and about to, well, basically eat the ground. This is where Uraraka actually slaps him, using her ability of zero gravity to save him. This causes him to basically gently hit the ground instead of the hard fall that he was going to have. After the fight was over, the muscle mass, or the biomass, actually goes back into his body, and his arms are very bruised. And this is also the point where his body starts to heal, but it's a lot slower than normal, than it would be in game. So at this point, his abilities are very new and very weak compared to someone like Alex Mercer, which is basically almost the pinnacle of the prototype series in terms of both strength, evolution, and things like that. So eventually, this is when Recovery Girl would come to heal both Uraraka and Deku. Deku being first since he had more injuries, at least at the time. By the time he actually does get healed by, well, Recovery Girl, his legs have basically reformed into the proper, form that legs are, instead of being, well, completely broken and kind of that mess, you could say. I don't want to go into much detail, but you know what I mean. So when he gets, affected by Recovery Girl's quirk, he instantly gets, healed a lot faster than he does in canon, because it works. It's basically speeding up the already fast process that Deku already has. So he basically gets fully healed. Uraraka does get healed also through Recovery Girl, and Deku goes home. He doesn't know what happened. He noticed that his arms were completely different than they normally would. He didn't really mention it at the time because he was kind of in the moment. He was filled with adrenaline and didn't really notice what was happening. Time seemed to slow down for him, you could say. But eventually when he got home and he calmed down, he was able to think about it. He remembered that his hands were completely different. They were not only more powerful because of One For All, but they also had some sort of black matter around it. He doesn't understand what it was, but he could only guess that it had to do with One For All. he thinks that One for All maybe unlocked or activated a dormant quirk of his. So he tries to, well, activate it. And eventually, he's able to get some of the biomass to come out of his, well, arms. And at this point, it's really only his arms. So, as he's doing this, he's kind of struggling to do so. He gets some of the biomass out of his arms, but to keep it there, it does take some willpower to do so. I would say it would be equivalent to having your eyes open for a very long time without blinking. That's the kind of stress that Deku's going under at this point. Eventually he does this for an hour, after which he gets really sore from doing it. He eventually goes to bed and wonders what he could do tomorrow and how to improve this new quirk, because he's not sure exactly how it works or really what it does, other than protecting him from One for All's backlash. He doesn't know much about it. So the next day he goes to UA, and this is where he goes to the classroom and he sees Bakugo talking to Ida. Well, not talking, but more getting yelled at. Deku does not want to really interfere, so he does it. But this is when Ida actually goes up to him and talks about how Deku was such an excellent student for knowing that there was more to the test than he thought. And Deku basically says, like, what are you talking about? I don't really understand. And this is where Ida talks about the the 0 pointer and him actually saving Uraraka. And he's like, oh, well, anyone would have done that. And Ida says, yes, you're probably right. If I knew if it wasn't a test, I surely would have went to go help her. And Deku says, see, well, I'm not too special. I just did whatever anyone else would. And this is when Uraraka would come in and ask Deku what his name was, as well as what his quirk, because he is the one who saved her. He said his name. He would say that his name is Izuku Midoriya, and that his quirk is, well, he doesn't really know what to say at this point because he doesn't want to give away the secret to One for All, as well as not really knowing too much about his own quirk. So he just says that it's a kind of transformation / enhancement quirk. So she takes that as it is, and as they're talking, this is where Aizawa actually comes in and basically tells the class to be quiet because they're going to do a fitness exam, and whoever does the worst actually gets expelled. So everyone gets changed into their PE uniforms and they go to the field. So each student would have to basically do the normal test like they do in the anime. So they use Bakugo as an example, with him throwing the ball both with and without his quirk. First, obviously without his quirk, only getting 70 meters, and then with his quirk getting over 700. This is to point out the fact that your quirks give you a large advantage in life, and throughout your school life, you haven't been able to really use it. So that's a real point that he's trying to drive home. So this is where Deku actually goes, or he has to basically try his best doing this. So at this point, it's been a day. Actually, no, it's not. It's actually been around a little bit more than a week since Deku's quirk has been activated. In this time, the virus has matured and really enhanced Deku's body a lot. So I would say that at this point, he is as strong as fast, or twice as strong and fast than a pro athlete. So he is in those levels of superhuman strength and speed, but not really far in that kind of area, at least just yet. That's only with the virus itself and not with One for All. So when he goes to throw the ball, this is a lot different than it is in canon. He uses muscle mass to actually throw the ball. And he also combines this with One for All, because Aizawa knows something about this kid. He would have told Deku to go all out because he knows that he's a successor for One for All, because he is one of the few people who knows All Might's secret, as well as seeing his performance at the entry exams. He wants to see what this kid's really capable of, because he was able to use All Might levels of strength and not really get too hurt, specifically around the arms. Obviously his legs were kind of, broken. So Deku throws the ball with, obviously, like I said before, muscle mass combined with all for one, or one for all. And because Deku doesn't have a full grasp on the power just yet, and he wasn't in a position, or he wasn't forced in a position where he had to use a certain percentage, he doesn't really know how to control it. So when he throws it, he uses 100%. So I would say in this one, he actually gets it across the city, the ball that is. And when he stops using it, his arms are a little bruised, but not as much as they were at the entry exam. I would say around 40% less bruised. So after he would show that his arms were bruised, Aizawa would have thought that maybe this kid isn't really right for hero work since he always hurts himself. But then he sees that the bruises start to go away slowly. Aizawa smiles, knowing that this kid has more secrets to him than he would have thought. He has some sort of healing factor, and this gets Aizawa excited, and he smiles, knowing that this kid has a lot of promise behind him. So after this, they would go through the other kind of tests. One being the, speed. I would think in this one, Deku would get third, with Ida getting first place and Todoroki getting second. This would get Bakugo mad, thinking that Deku has been hiding a quirk this entire time just to spite me, because at this point he thinks that Deku thinks less of him, just how he does in the anime. So he's very angry at Deku, and more than he was before, more than he was in the anime, because his quirk is a lot more, flashy in a sense, as well as less kickback to it, less drawbacks, you could say. And this gets Bakugo kind of mad, or a lot more than it was in canon. So we would get to the grip strength, and Deku would absolutely just wipe the floor with everyone in this regard, given the fact that he has one for all, and the Blacklight virus. He easily goes over the strongest character in Class 1A, at least physically, with grip strength, and that is Soji. So he would easily pass him and get first. This would kind of shock a few people in Class 1A, given Deku's shorter stature compared to the more stronger individuals in Class 1A like Soji. But regardless, it's a quirk, so they're not too surprised. After this, they would find out that Mineta was actually the one with the lowest score, but instead of, taking him and expelling him, which Aizawa plans to do, Deku actually stands up for Mineta and asks Aizawa to let him stay in the hero course, which eventually Aizawa does. He gives in and listens to Deku. After this, it would be a few hours later until it would be All Might's turn to be the teacher for the combat instructor, and this is where he would introduce himself to the class, saying, "I am here as your combat instructor," and this is where he would explain all the things they would have to do, specifically with the tests that they're going to do with the heroes versus villains. He would try not to, get people to know that Deku is his successor, things like that. So eventually they would go outside, and this is where they pick the teams for the heroes versus villains kind of test. So it'd be the same kind of teams that was in canon, that being Uraraka and Deku versus Ida and Bakugo. So it would go as normal, where Deku and Uraraka would be standing outside of the building, checking through each of the blueprints to see what's the best way to actually get to the top and get the bomb. So none of them really have a flying quirk. Uraraka does have the gravity, zero gravity quirk, but it is very, straining on her with her nauseousness and things like that, as well as she hasn't really improved it too much since it is the beginning of the series. So eventually they would go through the building and they would get a few floors up. So Bakugo, he's so mad at this point that he wants to just destroy Deku, and he kind of listens to Ida by that. So he doesn't actually follow Ida's plans, but he actually does listen to it somewhat, not getting too far away from Ida. So he's a few floors below Ida, but not all the way at the bottom floor like he was in the anime. So eventually the two meet, and this is where Deku would tell Uraraka to go ahead of him so that they could go to Ida while he would stay there and fight Bakugo. So Bakugo would be kind of angry at this point, rushing at Deku, thinking that this nerd thinks highly of himself, even more than he thinks that Bakugo is, well, maybe less than him, given the fact that he thinks that he's been hiding this quirk for so long. So what happens is that since Deku knows how Bakugo fights, he actually dodges his right hook, grabs Bakugo, and actually slams him into the ground. Now this is the point where Deku's actually trying to use less percentages of one for all, and he uses muscle mass in combination with this so he doesn't hurt his arms, and he uses around 30%. This gives him enough strength to shoot Bakugo or slam him through the floor that he's on onto the next floor below him, and this actually knocks out Bakugo for a few minutes. As this is done, he catches up with Uraraka to the top floor where Ida's at. So again, he doesn't want to use a high percentage, so he does not, as well as only really being able to use it in his arms without really getting hurt. He's forced to use it in his arms. So he goes and rushes for Ida to go and try to hit him. Deku isn't the best at fighting at this point because he's only been really training in terms of building muscle and not really combat training. But Ida comes from a line of hero, so he would have some experience. As Deku's rushing at him, he actually uses Deku's momentum against him. He charges with his jet engines and actually knees Deku in the stomach. So when an impact happens, the greatest point of force that it's applied is when there's a sudden stop. So that's really what happens. Since Deku is hitting something that's moving towards him, that sudden stop in his momentum does a lot of damage to him and actually knocks the wind out of Deku. This is when around the time where Bakugo actually does wake up and sees that he got slammed to the next ground or to the next floor, and he actually decides to point his grenade gauntlet up to the sky, to the ceiling, and pulls out the pin. This causes a giant explosion, and because Bakugo wasn't really prepared for the recoil, he actually gets knocked out again because of this, or he loses consciousness. This basically makes it where both Ida and Deku have nothing to stand on. They are in free fall while Uraraka goes and uses her gravity quirk on herself to catch the bomb, giving them the win, and Ida and Bakugo basically losing from this. So after this, Deku, he's feeling a bit more confident. The virus itself is changing his personality quite a bit, or somewhat, so he's beginning to have a bit more confidence. Think of Maggie from Parasite, the way it changes the main character's kind of personality a little bit. So this actually, as Deku's kind of getting praised, he notices a girl, and this girl is Momo Yatsurotsu, and he wants to impress her. So as he's thinking about what he could do, he thinks of hear me out, of trying to evolve his quirk. And this is a combination of almost instinct with the virus and him betting on what happened, because Deku thinks he has multiple quirks, because after he got unlocked, or he thinks it got unlocked by One for All, the hair, he thinks it might happen again. So he goes out to Kirishima and asks him for a strand of hair to see if he could use it. Kirishima, being kind of a nice guy and really wanting to help others, he decides to do so, but he doesn't really understand why. And Deku says, well, I just want to see if something happens, and he eats a strand of Kirishima's hair, and this gives him the armor ability. So at this point, it's not as strong as it is in game. In fact, I would say that it's around the strength of stone, so keep in mind that. So this draws more attention to Deku because he just got a full suit of armor just right there out of nowhere. So this specifically gets the attention of Momo because if you think about it, they have very similar quirks, at least with them being able to create things out of their kind of their body. They're similar but not quite the same. So yeah. Alright, so this is going to be the end of the video. I hope you liked it. If you like it, give it a like. If you want to see more from my channel, just subscribe. And if you made it to the end of the video, comment down CS. If you want to see more of this series, give it a like I said. And tell me down below how many episodes of this remastered series you want. So, I don't know how many I should make and what else I should remaster. You guys can tell me down below. So with that being said, this is going to be the end of the video. So yeah.